Yeah, welcome everybody as you're joining. We are recording this as is kind of normal for a one of these sessions, but please let us know if you're not happy for it to be recorded. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds time, and I think you will join unmuted, and you're very welcome to unmute yourself and say hello, but it's probably better for the experience if people stay muted whilst not talking. Please engage in the chat and ideally have your video on so we can see you.
For those of you who are shy, I had to get up at 6:30 a.m. here, so don't be shy at all. I'm in Toronto.
Definitely chime in the chat. We like an active audience here, and I think it'll be an intimate group today, which is nice.
We did a session a couple of weeks ago that had about 300 people on, and it was just like, oh my God. No one really wanted to do anything at all. Yeah, welcome everyone. I think we're going to get started now. As always with these lunchtime sessions, at least in European time, people drop in and out, and that's fine. But very, very warm welcome to what I think will be the last in our Human in Digital series of 2023. My name is Graham Hutchings. I'm the CEO of ProfitAbility. We are a game-based learning company. We specialize in bringing complex topics to life and helping some of the largest organizations in the world, like PepsiCo, Roche, Compass Group, solve these problems through really immersive, engaging, impactful learning experiences. We'll talk a little bit about those in the session today. The purpose of these sessions is to bring our network together. That's some clients, prospects, partners, to discuss kind of the key issues of the day. And if you're ever on LinkedIn these days, you'll see the big topic is learning technology, AI, all this sort of stuff, and trying to figure out what the hell is going on in this space. We thought we would do something ourselves and bring in what I know to be some of the leading experts on this topic. So I'm delighted to be joined by Laurie and Amanda from NilesNolen, who are going to run the session this afternoon. Just some housekeeping before I hand over to them. Please keep yourself. We want it to be interactive, so do engage in the chat, share where you're from, say hello to each other if you however you feel, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to contribute both verbally and in the chat, ideas and thoughts and so on. We will be sending a follow-up afterwards to kind of help you make sense of what we've covered, because we're going to cover quite a lot of ground. I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Laurie and Amanda.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining. See a lot of you in the chat. We've got everything from the US to Berlin to Austria, to Switzerland, and Morocco. Wonderful. So thank you very much for taking the time. We hope this will be a good use of the next hour. And because it is a small group, we do look forward to hearing your comments and questions. And in fact, we're going to start with a question. The topic here is 2028, which feels far away, but I don't know about you, but I can't even distinguish between 2020, 2021, and 2022. They all just feel like one big long year. So the future is here, and we're not that far away from it. So what I'd love to do is to start with one question to ask you. What is your one prediction for the future of learning? And I'm sure we're going to see AI in there, that I'm predicting, but we'd love to hear some of what's your prediction for what you see for the future of learning. And then we'll talk through some of the ones that we're seeing or what we think are going to be coming up. So you can either chat in the chat pod there, or you can unmute yourself if you'd like to share, but I look forward to hearing your responses.
Laura, you told them they couldn't talk about AI, so what are they going to say now? Come on. Talk about AI, but AI what? AI will.
Yeah. All right, so we see some great ones coming in here. Skills-based and targeted to individual needs. Really, really interesting stuff. And yes, we will talk about that. Fiona said similar, but different. Hyper-personalized learning in the flow. Yep. Hybrid and online and live. Yep. Enhanced self-learning. Individual learning paths, flexibility we've got there. Jeff says skills focus versus roles focus. Completely agree. That's definitely a theme that's happening right now. And Oliver in Berlin, I was just there. Individual learning and agility. Philip, lifelong will really be lifelong. Yes. It's interesting. I went to see my parents this weekend. My father's almost 80. And he was more in tune with what's going on with AI than I am. He's, basically every morning he goes to perplexity.ai and he just gets his summary of the world. And it was really quite fascinating. Although he did use ChatGPT to write a birthday card to my mother, and she looked at this and said, "Who wrote it?" And and my father was like, "How did you know?" And she says, "You don't use big words." So I thought that was quite amusing. But yeah, lifelong learning will really be lifelong. So a lot of really good comments in there. And so some themes that are coming out is that idea of personalization, and the idea that it's individual to you. I think is in different ways, and also to breaking things down from what was an aggregate to an individual. So moving from roles to skills as well. Will has also said here, greater focus on in the moment and micro learning opportunities. This is going to be very, very true. And there's going to be a split. We already have some of this between what is in the moment versus what do you really need to devote to learn sort of the deep skills. So something that's more of an immersive experiential learning experience versus the things that you just need to know as you're doing and going about your day. So a lot of really, really great comments there. Thank you very much. We'll go through what we sort of see, but again, we can also debate some of these things. But here's what we're seeing right now. Amanda, maybe I'll put it over to you to start on some of these.
Yeah, I mean, the first one, and this is us being very optimistic, because what I see is AI generating a lot of content right now. It's about more content and sleeker content and avatar content. And, it's great that there are fewer women holding clipboards, but really let's hope that it's going to be more about something a little more exciting, about reverse engineering these learning experiences, really thinking about, what is the skill gap, what is the business outcome, what is the career outcome, and then reverse engineering from there. As well as from an experience perspective, the LMS and the LXP, we really hope it will become invisible, meaning it will be something where it isn't a separate destination where people go for learning, but it will be a software that exists in the background, that it's enabling this, but the learning itself will be embedded in the place where people are actually doing their work. Skills-based organizations, Lori, I'll let you talk about this because I know you have your LinkedIn Learning course on this, which you can give a shameless plug for, or I guess I just did.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea of a skills-based organization, which and it came up actually in the comments as well, and in the chat pod, is the idea that we talk about roles, but really we need to break them down by skills. The example I like to give is you can be a barista in Milan versus a barista in Starbucks, and yes, I do have my Starbucks, but it's a tea right now. Those two baristas have very different skills, despite the fact that their title is barista. And so what skills do they have? That's what's critical for organizations to understand. We're going to look at fulsome integration at the whole employee life cycle. And I think that really ties into that idea of personalization and lifelong. We also heard that come up in the chat, which are great shouts. Closed loop reporting. I'll explain this a little bit more when we get to this, but closed loop reporting is that we're able to see things in real time in terms of how we're impacting the business, which is quite interesting. And of course, experiential learning, which is something that we're a huge fan of. And we actually had the chance to see a live session with ProfitAbility, and it was really incredible how it's done, and being in that experience and being able to try things and see what works and what doesn't in a safe environment is really quite critical. See here also too, a few things have come up in the chat as well. Just going to pull those up. Will says some detail. Yes, expect less formal structured LMS content. Completely. Yeah, think of AI sitting between the learner and the content, and based on the interaction between the learner and AI, the AI structures and serves relevant content on the fly. Absolutely. I love how you phrase that there. The idea too that there's a co-pilot, or there's something something that's in between you and the learning, and making it truly individual. I love, and we'll talk about this, is Duolingo and how they use AI, which they've been doing for a very, very long time. It's, to me, one of the best examples as to how AI can help learning. But the idea, though, is that AI, we're seeing a lot of it is generating content. And this, I like to joke that this cat is like your LMS administrator who's being given a whole bunch of AI built content that's all exactly the same, and now they have to upload it to the LMS, and they're just absolutely bewildered. So we really like to go beyond AI just as content generation, because there's already a bunch of content. If you think of the 70-20-10, if you follow that 10% of content, we've got that covered, but we're missing a lot of other things. So I'd love
But
to
Lori,
know.
the cats, they're so cute, though. Isn't everyone going to want to pet them?
Yeah. Think about the litter box you're going to have to clean when you have 8 cats.
Okay, and the metaphor goes on. You get the point.
Exactly. And I have a cat, so I understand these challenges all too well. The question we'd like to hear from you is, how are you using AI at your organization? Are you using it at all? If you want to type into the chat pod, it's interesting. We've seen some organizations who are now saying, even in their RFPs, no AI. That's absolutely not allowed, because their IT will not allow it, and others are completely embracing it. Okay, so Moulet says no AI so far. We also had another comment that came in here. It feels like understanding relevant and emerging skills for each job. Yes, it's still going to be a lot of work. You're absolutely right, Steph. AI will be able to help, but we need to make sure, right, that people are developing the right areas. Keep that in mind, Steph, because we're going to talk specifically to that, because it is really, really important. Graham, we train an AI assistant for each new game development project, and that's amazing. That's really amazing. So you can use it quite a bit for that. AstraZeneca, hi Rosemary. It's used in a myriad of ways. Yes. AstraZeneca has been an early adopter, and as Steph points out, it's using it as an individual, but maybe not for the organization. And Philip, as much as possible, especially teaching students about advantages and risks, that's absolutely critical, because it's funny, at one of our local universities, when ChatGPT launched, 48 hours later, someone had made t-shirts that said, "Sorry, my essay is late, ChatGPT was down," which I thought was quite funny. So it really has disrupted that. Oliver, not yet. And Brian, using it as a marketing assistant, that's a really interesting one, because marketing has really been disrupted by AI. So it is quite fascinating. So thank you for all of those comments and responses. But the idea is if you're thinking about AI, and it's going to be there, it can't just be about the content. We have the content at the center, but we also need to think about the things around it. So the context, application, and data. And those are the intersection. We have to make sure that the content gets surfaced when all of those other three conditions are right. So to give you an example here, and I mentioned it briefly before, Duolingo. I'm learning Polish and German. I speak Polish, my husband's German. So this was an actual sentence that I got, which is, "Wine is not a meal," which I think is a little bit judgmental. I was very surprised to get that. But if you look at how Duolingo has been using data, they've been using AI machine learning for years to look at how people actually learn. They're looking at billions of interactions to see what it takes for somebody to learn a particular grammatical point, what it takes to learn a word and then use it in everyday language. So it's very, very interesting. They've made learning a science, not an art, because of data. And if you have one of their accounts, you can sign up for free. I have the paid version, but they're now looking into music and mathematics and how that feeds in together. So it's very, very interesting. I also see too from Will a comment here. You're working with a Big Four consulting firm, prototyping and creating a platform that can educate and advise and facilitate core processes they offer to clients. This is about bringing learning content together with operational content and process execution data preparation. I advise everybody to find Will and learn more about that, because that's really really interesting and quite important. So it's this idea that we need to think differently and more holistically about the entire learning experience. And I just flagged Duolingo because they're the ones that have done this quite well. Amanda, if you want to talk about the invisible LMS.
Yeah, so again, this is about what we were talking before. It's not so much that the LMS is going to be a destination platform where you have to log in as a learner in your company and go to. It's going to really be embedded, and it's not exactly what we've known as learning in the flow of work. It's about, when you think, if you have possibly done any online shopping lately. I know I have. Christmas is coming, looking for gifts, and maybe I'm saying, oh, some Spider-Man helmet for my nephew, and then all of a sudden this pops up everywhere I go. I can't avoid it. It's in all of my socials. You know what it is. And so, like it or not, this is things that are appearing to us in a way that is kind of embedded in the flow of what we're doing. As well, so it's taking inspiration from marketing. It's not the same as marketing, because learning is not marketing, but it's how do we really nudge people and give them things that they were already looking for, to then encourage them to continue on that track. It also does mean integrations with the tools, the work tools that we're already using, like Teams, like our CRMs, like Slack, etc. So that's kind of the idea behind the invisible LMS. It doesn't mean the software goes away. It's just that people can't see it so much anymore, and it becomes a back end or a middleware thing anyway.
Yeah, so it's interesting how it is, because we get ads all the time and things pop up for us, but you don't go to Google Ads and say, today, right now, I would like you to advertise to me. That's not something that happens. So it's something to consider. So I hear your point, Philip, about Duolingo, and that they are culturally American. I completely agree. I think, though, the point I was making is, it's interesting when you look at how I'm learning German, for example, and I'm struggling with the dative case, which is a grammatical point, and it's interesting to see how it's really forcing me in a way to learn, and it's nudging me towards continuous improvement with that. It also makes my mother-in-law very happy if I ever use it correctly, which is not always often. Okay. Another comment here, it's very good at using gamification and game-based techniques to raise in-game engagement. Yes, and the other thing too I would say about Duolingo is also seems to be really catered to students. I seem to be learning a lot of vocabulary about renting an apartment and going out and partying, which at my age, I'm not doing so much. And I'm like, can we talk about like medical words? Because I could use those sometimes. I'm getting older, or some basics. But it's just very, very interesting. And some of the courses are very weird in content. Yeah, agreed. But when you start to look at, like, for example, the one that I showed, like, wine is not a meal, there's actually a grammatical point that they're trying to teach you that becomes memorable because of the sentence. I'm not going to go too far down that, but it's sometimes the phrases are deliberately unusual, because then you remember the grammatical point. But that's a whole other conversation. The point here, though, when we talk about the invisible LMS, what does this mean for us? I'm going to use an example when we talk about the Internet of Things. And this is something that has started, we had it previously, but it's increasing. And it's the idea that, for example, I have a Fitbit, and Fitbit was bought by Google. And now my Fitbit integrates with other applications. And so it's not just sitting here telling me what steps and my heart rate, it's actually now feeding into nudging me when I should exercise, reminding me to meditate, doing all of these different things together. And the example that I like to give to bring it to life, how we need to think about content and how it surfaces, actually has to do with toilet paper, loo roll. I'm very sorry to say this. But my husband and I, we typically do one large grocery shop a week. We walk to a grocery store nearby. And as I was walking there one day, it popped up on my iPhone that here is a coupon for toilet paper. So I was thrilled because obviously who doesn't love getting a couple of dollars, I'm in Canada, or euros or pounds off of toilet paper. It's a great thing to have, but it was also kind of strange when I thought about it. And what it really was this triangulation of data that made it surface to me. So I have a loyalty card that I use and scan there. And for any of you who do have a loyalty card with any store, that data is money to them. It's knowledge, and they're able to see your patterns, and they're able to learn things about you because you scan it as you purchase. So using that loyalty card information, it could probably estimate the size of my household. Okay, so it knew based on what I was purchasing, whether I have children or I don't, I have a cat, I don't, all those things it starts to pull together. It probably knew, I'm embarrassed to say, the last time I bought toilet paper, because it would track everything. I don't know if there was GPS because I was near to the store, but it certainly knew the time and the day that I was likely to go to the store, and probably what price point. It knew what brand and price I would purchase for toilet rolls. This is a lot of data, and it's a little bit creepy to say the least. But this idea then that it knew all these things about me meant that it could then surface a piece of content. If you think of that diagram I showed before with content at the center, with data, context, and application, that was when it served up the coupon to me. Had it been really, really smart, because we usually go on a Saturday or Sunday, it may have shown me something on a Wednesday to see if it could trick me into going to the grocery store twice a week. But that's how we need to start to think about data and those experiences. Right? So if we think about data and what we have within our own company, Amanda, I'll put this over to you, some of the places where data is available.
Yeah, I was just thinking, looking at some of your faces, you might be thinking, what the heck does this have to do with learning and development? Right? We're talking about toilet paper, we're talking about all of these crazy things, but actually it's all about data. And so it's about when we think about the holy grail really here of personalization and getting the right stuff to the right people, aligned with the skills gaps that are going to make them more employable and companies more successful, it really has to do with that. It's that reverse engineering we were talking about at the beginning. And in order to do that, we have to look at data. So the question is, where do we get that data? Right? So an example Laura was just using, it's that loyalty card. By the way, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You get the discounts, but they get your data. And the same is true, with L&D. So what could be the possible sources? The HRIS, it could be your talent, your project management software, CRMs, all these things on the list. You can read the screen yourselves. And so it's really about pulling in all that data about what people are already doing, where are they engaging, what does their work life look like, to pull that in and then to make educated assumptions about how we might embed learning and be more personalized and more meaningful for them.
Excellent. And Rosemary raised a really good point. I'm sorry that we are talking about toilet paper here, but did the coupon provide an unnecessary discount as you would have purchased anyway? Completely agree. Now, I don't remember how much toilet paper I had on hand when the coupon surfaced for me, so I can't remember. I can definitely say though that this happened after the pandemic, so I was not hoarding toilet paper. But it's very true. It's the idea that L&D can also follow into this trap. You want to be very deliberate about how you're thinking about these things and how they come together. But think of it this way, this is maybe more of an L&D experience. And since Amanda is the fluent Spanish speaker here, I'll let her talk to this one.
Yeah, so I am not it is true that I speak fluent Spanish, but there's not much merit in that because I've lived in Madrid for 25 years and I keep saying I'm going to learn French or something else and I don't, but maybe that's my New Year's resolution. Anyway, so imagine if you do want to learn a new language and you've just completed level 4 of Spanish, right? What if next time you do log in to some application that you're using for work like Excel or PowerPoint, you get a prompt that says, hey, do you want to try to work in another language? Right? And you can change the language settings and have that experience. So while you're doing the work, you're trying to do it in another language. That would be the kind of things that we would love to see optimistically. I would hope before 2028, actually, some of this stuff actually is possible today. And I do, by the way, if you are learning a language or your kids are, definitely watch any movie with subtitles in the language that you're learning, and ideally with the audio in that as well. So that's a way of embedding it.
Yeah, but the idea is for L&D to think about the different ways that this can service. AI is not going to build this for you. Okay, it's the thinking that now AI will start to say, hey, we know that if they're at level 3, it doesn't always work, but level 4 is the optimum. You know, those types of things. But it's us that are going to be the ones to construct these types of learning experiences. There's some interesting debate happening right now in the chat pod. Brian mentions that Amazon is now offering discounts for regular repeat orders. I wonder how L&D can do the same. But Rosemary says, and if L&D can do the same, is that desirable? Again, really good questions. We have to think intelligently about how we create these experiences and making sure that it's actually lending themselves to outcomes and closing performance gaps. And we'll get a little bit crisper on that in the next section. So it's not just about flooding somebody with learning. That's something that I'm also quite worried about, that people are going to have a co-pilot, and then they're going to have another co-pilot, and then they're going to have a chat bot, and then they're going to have this. And it's like, whoa, you know, how many pop-ups can somebody have, and how is it, you know, moving away from the learning experience? Rosemary,
and likewise, sorry, as we talk about at the beginning about content consumption, just consuming more and more and more content, just because you tick the box of it, you know, and finished a ton of modules doesn't mean you've actually learned anything.
Yeah.
So that's where the learning experience is so important. So just to think about that as well, it's learning is not the same as marketing. It's not the same as entertainment. It's not just about this, you know, pumping out this, you know, consume. That does not equal skills developed, right?
Really good. And Rosemary asked a question, aren't people learning all the time? 70, 20, 10. I don't think, I think respectfully, I'd say on that one, not necessarily. You think of frontline workers who are doing the same thing, repetitive tasks over and over again, and that's a big majority. Or people who are working in the same role, they may not be stretching and expanding and learning. It may be something that's actually quite repetitive. And you know, they don't always have the opportunity for that. And Brian mentions there are those who learn for 10 years and those who are employed for 10 years, we get 1 year's learning. It is the latter that don't ever reflect on the experience and derive learning from it. Yeah, and those are your targets. So you need to look. We need to look broadly, and how we're being meaningful. Because also too, a lot of those jobs that are repetitive, they're the ones that are going to be most impacted by automation, and they're the ones that are most at risk of being replaced. So a mindset does need to change there. But when we look at all of this, we need to think of something I'd like to call closed loop reporting. And this is being able to track impact that, you know, within hours of completion. So there's now technologies that are out there that if you have a group of people who do a piece of learning and then they go back out to the factory floor, imagine being able to see sensors to see whether or not somebody is actually applying what they just learned. It's that immediate. So that idea that there's I call it the closed loop, the idea that you're able to connect those things together. We've long since tried to prove the return on investment for learning. It's always been a thing that we've tried to do, but things are getting closer. And what we mean by this is APIs are now plugging into learning management systems. So an API is an application programming interface. If you aren't familiar with that, it's basically taking data from two systems and allowing them to talk to each other. So this is a very, very interesting shift. But in order to have this closed loop reporting, you know, a lot of L&D works in terms of ADDIE, which is, you know, we've done it for years, but you now need to shift. Your target operating model has to be very cyclical because you're getting data all the time. It's no longer a once and done type thing where you take a course and put it out there and then just say, did it have impact? I have a couple of things coming up in the chat. Amanda, can you address it just while I have the glass of water? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, there's an interesting debate. Rosemary, we can always count on you for a good debate about the work isn't the only place we can learn. I think you're absolutely right. And so just to be honest about, what we can impact, what we can. But even in the time that we do have with people, I think there's so much more. There's so much more room for improvement in terms of at least being really clear to people, what are the real skills gaps that are going to help you as an employee be better in your career and are going to help us as a business, again, to reverse engineer from there and then build these better learning experiences that are not just dumping content on people in order to close those gaps in a meaningful way. But agreed, we are not just our jobs, and there's a lot that happens, outside of the 9 to 5 or whatever hours that we put in. That's a good point there.
What do you think, just jumping in here, Laurie and Amanda, what are the implications of like closely reporting for maybe cultural change and leadership development areas where the measurement of impact of initiative remains difficult?
Dubious?
Yeah.
I think it's going to challenge those quite a bit, because you are going to be looking at where the impact is, not just 3 months down the road or 6 months down the road. It's going to be, potentially, okay, you're in leadership. It might be looking at your Microsoft Teams and say, are you creating silos? In terms of the people that you're interacting with, things like that. So I think it's going to challenge a lot of those models in a very healthy way. I think they do need to be challenged. I like to think of learning, I call it's essentially a tax on an individual, meaning, we're taking their time, possibly their money, if it's their own, investment, but we're asking them to give something of themselves, and we want to make sure that we use that investment for the right things. So I think it is going to challenge those models in a very healthy and open.
And the ROI of learning has been sort of this perennial theme, and I do think that we are going to have more data points to really show if we're smart about saying this is the baseline, this is where we were to start, and this is where we are after we've introduced a learning initiative. I do think we will be in a position to say this has made a difference or it hasn't, and to challenge some of those initiatives that are kind of fluffy, quite frankly, and a lot of money is spent on the special people at the top and not so much for everybody else. And I think there's going to be, especially in this challenging market, there's going to be a lot of question marks about the return on some of those larger ticket items, or at least I think there should be more scrutiny for sure.
It really comes down to, we need to think about learning experience and how that actually happens. So the question I ask, and I think the answer is obvious, which brain surgeon do you want? Do you want one that's maybe never sat in a classroom or gone to, school or opened a textbook, but they've apprenticed with a brain surgeon in the operating theater for years? Or do you want somebody who's watched a lot of TikTok and done pathways on brain surgery? I know which one I would prefer, and I hope no one ever needs a brain surgeon. But this idea that these are we need to start thinking about what we consider skilled, what we consider somebody able to perform a task, and what does that look like? And I also think too, in this new environment, things like compliance training are going to be healthily challenged, right? Just because somebody clicks through to the end, does it mean they really know it, and are they performing it? But there is a content tipping point. I like to use this website. It's called forgetify.com. And it has on it, it uses AI to scrape songs that never have been played even once on Spotify. So, and you can go on there if you want, just to have a listen and make that person feel good to get one listen, but 4 million songs that have not been played once. And the problem that I'm trying to highlight here is that with all of the AI, how much content are we generating? Is it of use? Is it of impact? And content is really just a sliver of it. It's the entire experience that we need to be pulling together. So, AI content, I don't predict is going to be our problem. It's going to be that practice, application, and feedback at scale, which is going to be the challenge that we're going to have. These are things that AI isn't necessarily very good at yet. We know that there is development. I'm going to turn it over to Graham to speak just for a few moments, a little bit more about this.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. Just a couple of minutes from me. I think the audience here knows, like, doesn't need to be sold on the benefits of experiential learning, but I think when we're talking about the future of learning over the next 5 years and all the technology and terms that we're getting our heads around, like, we just need to remember how human beings actually learn and develop skills. And the Purvis quote on the left is something I'm sure people have seen before, and a lot of game-based learning, experiential learning, is kind of predicated on this research and lots of other research like it, that where the basic premise is if people enjoy what they are experiencing, the new connections, that physiological manifestation of a new skill in your brain happens much, much faster. So while Purvis's work was mainly focused on like childhood play, like 0 to 10, where your brain's developing really fast, the same things do work in adult corporate learning, but you've got to make the experiences sufficiently difficult, challenging, ideally social, meaningful, and really relevant. And that reward system part of your brain is the same place where that joy and happiness comes from. That will also trigger the dopamine release, which is really the kind of accelerator of skill development. And you can really shortcut skill development if you give your people those types of experiences. If we just move to the next slide. And this is just my own way of thinking about it, building off some of the things that Laurie's been speaking about. And I call this the kind of golf versus football problem. We see a lot of organizations doing what they think is really good experiential learning, and like, we're obviously big fans of experiential learning, but we see what we see is kind of a solution that's not going to tackle the really big problems. And when I think of golf, which is a sport I love, but you play golf with a still ball against, and it's just you playing that ball. And normally in a game of golf, your results in golf are compared against other people who have done the same thing at the end of the day. Your strategies and your performance are not really influenced by other people. And it's really only down to you. Your success and failure is determined. That's why people find it frustrating. Whereas with football and all team-based ball sports, you're dealing with a moving ball. You've got all the vagaries and complexities of your teammates' behaviors and how they're going to show up, and the culture in your team. And your performance is totally determined by your success against another team trying to do the same thing. There's infinitely more complexity in that situation. And anyone familiar with kind of systems thinking, systems design, might be familiar with this idea of a complicated problem, which is like learning a language. That's a complicated problem, whereas there's a relatively predictable way of solving that problem. It's difficult, but it's relatively predictable, and you don't need a ton of people involved to solve that. Whereas a complex problem has some broad boundaries, but there's so much unpredictability. In a game of football, there's no absolute strategy that's going to win every time. And that's much more like the free market in business works. Like, it's difficult, people are difficult, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And if we can just move to if we roll this on to kind of a business context, there's a lot of experiential learning that's being rolled out now, and it's going to happen even more with AI, that is only really going to solve a complicated problem. It's still not really going to, and it's going to help, it's going to give some foundation, but to really move the needle on the complex problems and the corresponding problems on the right, organizations are going to have to give their people much more chance to apply these skills in context. Just to give an example, we see a lot of what we call kind of fair weather empathy right now, where like it's easy in like a sterile training environment or when you're interacting with a model avatar to learn how to respond to a certain situation. Under the, like, quite frankly, normal pressure and stress and unfamiliarity of a real team situation dealing with real humans, that is much, much more difficult. And those synapse creations are only going to happen on those that complex example. Okay, so my message is building these experiential learning pathways for complicated problems are great, but don't expect them to solve your complex problems. It's like entering a Formula 1 race on a push bike. Like, you will eventually get to the end, but you'll be miles behind.
Graham, just a question for you. I hope you don't mind me breaking your flow, but do you think the only way how to learn how to deal with these complex versus complicated problems is through some degree of social learning? Is that kind of your thesis?
I think that the definition of complex problem is one that you can't solve by yourself. Well, one of the definitions is. And so you can't sort of achieve cultural transformation just by loads of people learning what your values are. Or, it's just not, it's just that's trying to make it a science when it's an art. So a big function of L&D over the next 5 years, I think, has to be connecting people from different functions. Because the answers to these problems do lie in the organization. It's just there's far too many silos and there's not enough opportunity for people in marketing to connect with finance or operations to connect with sales. And one of the primary themes we get in the feedback from our experiences is yes, they enjoy the game and they enjoy learning stuff, but it's that social learning that they have that thing. I never realized you approach this problem like that. And if all of these people, if you're getting 50,000 employees going on their own learning journeys, which obviously they need to develop some certain skills, you risk 50,000 different understandings of the same problem. And so you need to do the stuff on the left to get the baseline, but you need to do the stuff on the right to actually move the needle and gain competitive advantage.
Thank you, Graham. So question to the group there, are there any predictions we missed? Anything that you yourself are like, hey, I see this as happening. Love to hear your thoughts. And you can also too, if you don't feel like typing, feel free to unmute yourself. We are a small group.
I'll come off mute and see if I can break the silence. Sure. I'm a bit husky and I've got a terrible cold. That's why I've got my camera off, because like my red nose stands out on the screen at the moment.
I'm sorry to hear it.
No, but you're cheering me up, distracting me. I think the thing about predictions is we'll only know, we'll miss some of them completely, right? Of course, there are predictions we'll have missed, because that's the problem. We can only predict the sort of the adjacent and the imaginative beyond the adjacent. There'll be something about the way that AI changes work that we won't see. There'll be like a chess move that in 5 years' time we'll all be saying we saw, but it will have crept up on us. And then some of the things I think are all too predictable. And I think Amanda referenced it earlier that we could just get way more content, and we don't need more content dumping, but we can do it quicker. And that's definitely a risk, if not a prediction. But I really liked the piece that just then about the complicated and the complex, and I was also thinking that some of these things are not for learning to fix, and that's really important that we think about that. So just with the examples that you had there, the golf problems, the football type problems, some of those things you could just fix them by rewarding good behavior, right? Because what you practice in the classroom, you can be, the knowing doing gap is huge. But if you have perverse rewards, if you don't punish people who are mean to others at work, but they deliver lots of financials and you reward them on that basis, that's what you'll get. So there are other systems that are responsible for behavior aside from learning. And that takes me back to the forklift on the factory floor, right? Where it said, your example was about, you could look at the learning because you've got sensors on the floor. Well, if you've got sensors on the floor for the forklift trucks, why just not have a green light for good behavior and a red light for bad behavior? Too close to. We have in the UK now, we have speed sensors, which as you approach, give you a green smiley face if you're under the speed limit and a red downward frown if you're above it. So it doesn't need learning, it's just a behavior reinforcement loop, right? I didn't have to go on a training program. I mean, obviously I did go on a training program years and years ago when I got my driving license, but we just don't need to be in that. We could just have an alarm if you go too far close with a forklift and a smiley green face if you're the optimal distance.
And completely agree. And I think that's also a good question for learning. You know, some things don't need to be learning, you know, and we always try and make them learn when really there's quick fixes. I think that comes down to doing really good performance consulting, and to determine that. Just want to also honor, sorry to keep us moving, but I did want to, Will has his hand up, so I'd like to hear from him. We also had a comment from Steph here. We complain about how much time for learning. I wonder how long the shift in perception to the notion that learning is the job, not the job, is excellent. We have to bake that in. That is part of your job, is to keep learning. But over to you, Will, with your hand raised.
Thanks, Laurie. I think that the comment from Steph is actually a great segue into the first point that I'd like to make. I think that there are 2 points that I'd like to make. Is one thing that we haven't.
Oh, I think Will is frozen. Is he just frozen for me or for everybody? Okay, so apologies to that. We'll need to move. So apologies for that, Will.
That natural type of engagement that allows the learning to unfold as the conversation develops, because then it hits the targets based on the context of the organization and what it needs done, and the individual and where they are. So I think that's a huge shift, and that'll probably get us away from having to produce reams and reams of content that we think are relevant but actually aren't. And the interactions become more pointed, more efficient, and focused. So that's the one point. And the reason I say that is because that's been one of the biggest learnings that I've been on with the small team that I'm working with, about how to put together something that can educate in context and then guide and facilitate something almost as part of one conversation. It's, I need to know how to do this. I know my job, but I need to know how to do this specific thing. There's a new scenario, and then we explore that a little bit. Yes, this looks, thanks, I understand this now. Can you help me through? And then just go and do it. So that's a big one. I think the bit about complicated and complex scenarios. Interestingly, what we're working on is bridging the two. It's about taking complicated stuff and looking at the impact more complex in organizations. And again, it's about a big shift in learning space and LMS, and how LMS evolves and how learning evolves from an organizational perspective. I think is the essence and ethos of the organization is going to have to come to life more in the training, in the education opportunities, but also in the, call it, reinforcement or encouragement opportunities to, do as training has asked type thing. Because you otherwise you run that risk of everyone goes off in their own direction, learns their own solution to the same problem, etc. So how do we bring effectively the personality of the organization alive in that education, in that learning process? And learning isn't just the education and transmission of knowledge, it is that reinforcement of behavior as well, to get to the desired outcome. So those are my 2 points.
Totally agree. Just in the interest of time, just going to move to one other area, and thank everyone for their contributions here, is when we talk about skills. So I actually do have a little video here. This is,
of course you have another animal video, Laurie. Of course you do.
Of course I do. So here we have a dog, quite happy, playing the piano. Why did I show this? One, because it's funny, but two, it's also too, if we aren't thinking carefully about our learning and our structure, and I think this ties into what Will was saying and Graham earlier as well, we can have people spending time learning things that they're really happy about learning, which is great, but maybe they're not particularly good at, they haven't gotten a lot of feedback on it, or they're not skills that we need as an organization. So this comes down to when we need to, and a lot of you have mentioned it before, moving towards a skills-based organization and what that means. And when we think about it, it's looking at what's in the wallet. So we give the example of skills. I like to say, it's like, imagine you have in your wallet, you have pounds, rupees, yen, and you know how much you have, and you can determine how much you need based on where you're going to be traveling to. So that's that idea of why we think of skills. And so we know when we have a gap. But there's really 3 layers when we talk about skills-based organizations. There's the one, it's what is in the wallet. Second level is saying, okay, we know what's in the wallet, we know what gaps we have, and we're going to address those skills gaps proactively. And then there's the third layer of skills-based organizations, what nobody has really cracked yet, but it's where organizations are starting to go. It's this idea that work that you do, you don't necessarily have a role. You get tasks based on your skills and expertise every day. So it's a very different way of working. And this is ultimately the direction of travel. And this is also too why skills are so important, and why we try and be very critical about skills, because a lot of times L&D is thinking skills is just something, it's just a word change, or we're just breaking it down. It's like, no, it's actually the entire organization and how work is going to be done. It also is going to remove the idea of, people managers are the only way to succeed. The individual contributor with deep technical skills can now, is going to be elevated because they're highly valued in what they provide. You don't need to have a team to necessarily get the next pay grade or accelerate in your career. And so this becomes quite interesting. We also too had, just to address a couple of things that's coming in here, the social learning doesn't need to be in the old school classroom training style. I completely agree, Graham. Really good points there. Discovery, not tell. And I also see too that we had comments above as well from Brian and Jeff. The disasters to avoid the waterfall cascade of learning, where people with no skills in learning are asked to teach others, who teach others, etc. Completely agree that this can be quite problematic. But
I think there's a lot of danger there, just to jump in as well. If we just kind of, this is why I have such a problem with self-driven learning and owning your own development, because if we just assume, oh, just let people figure it out. Well, actually, a lot of people don't even know where they should invest their limited time and resource in developing themselves, because they don't understand where the world is going, where the company is going. And I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, but if we can directionally just give them a sense of, hey, if you maybe invest in this skill, you might have a better shot at staying employed at this company, let alone get a promotion or a pay rise, right? And so I think there's something that comes before learning itself as well, that is not to go down a rabbit hole, but it's something that we should really think about in terms of giving people the sense of the why before that might motivate them to engage more with any learning experience.
Agreed. So we use a term that's called right skilling, where we're thinking about how you think about what skills your organization needs, and you manage them just like you would in a supply chain. So if we think of tomatoes, say, for example, you're a pizza factory, you need tomatoes. You can either buy them at the market or you can grow them. And you need to be thinking about, you don't want to have too many tomatoes on site, because those are at risk of spoilage and rotting. But also it might be very expensive, or there's a shortage to find them in the market. So that's about, finding talent or growing it. And L&D really needs to be in that growing space to understand, if I have a seed, what does it take to actually grow that tomato? What are all the conditions I need to have? How much does it cost? Is it possible? Do we even have people who want to be doing that? So we need to think very, very critically, and not just be like, here's the happy dog playing the piano. It's being really hyper focused. Do I need 17 or 71 people trained in a particular skill? We need to be that laser focused. And for some people who say, skills, is it fast fashion or forever? If you go on LinkedIn right now, you'll see that when you search for a job, you can search actually by skills. So somebody, for example, maybe was a journalist and has, writing obviously as a skill, that's going to open up a whole bunch of other opportunities if they search by skill. So it's interesting to see that they are already preparing for that sort of paradigm and what that shift will be, because people will move and migrate a lot in their careers, much more so than what we've seen up until now. Coupled with that, we see a lot of internal marketplaces. These are designed to help people move internally as they develop skills. And if you're in L&D, I would really urge you to talk to talent to see if they are working with a talent marketplace, because this is the place where people are going to get that experience, and it should be part of the entire continuum of people learning. So they might be
not only the experience, but the why, the for what, as I was saying before. It's like, okay, I get it. If I invest myself in developing these things, that there might be a stretch assignment for me, or an opportunity in another country, or another, that it really makes it come alive. And I think this is still a work in progress in most organizations, and talent and learning still don't work together as well as they should. But it definitely, I think it's a very positive direction of travel.
And as we come to the end, we did want to give you a list of some places where you were able to stay current. Oh, those slides, actually, it's not showing the text on there, so I'm going to have to make sure we get the slides to you. But we did have a list of people to follow on LinkedIn. They're not friends of ours, they're just people that we tend to go to. Oh, here we go. You can actually see it. Sorry, it was on the right-hand side. If you're starting now, talk to the C-suite about how learning is evolving. This is a really good conversation to have now. And ask the question, is your organization moving towards skills? We know it, but skills cannot just be L&D. And also being clear during performance consulting, talk to the stakeholders before about the need to think beyond just the content and what that whole continuum needs to be. And likewise, I'll just move back because it did show up and I just wasn't able to see it there. This is a list of people that we tend to follow that have to have really good things to say about the future of learning and AI. My other favorite place to go is it's a website called There's an AI for That. And any new AI platforms or technologies, it puts them up in the morning every day. You can see and follow them. You can also curate your feed to be just about learning. So you'll see all sorts of great stuff that comes on there. And it's very, very interesting. And as I said, it's updated so regularly in real time. So really advise you to have a look at that. There's also some free content out there. Elements of AI I found to be quite helpful. Of course, there's LinkedIn Learning. They've made all of their AI content free. There's a really good report about AI and marketing. We touched on marketing before, but there's a link here that you may want to have a look at because it's quite interesting. And finally, ask ChatGPT, how will my industry be affected by AI? Start playing with it. You'll be surprised at some of those answers.
And to add my 2 cents, start playing with it would be my recommendation. So if you haven't already, get ChatGPT, but not the free version. Pay for, in my opinion, ChatGPT 4 because it's exponentially better. And the only way really, we're all figuring this out as we go, even the people that built this. And so we are the experts. Ethan Mollick, who's a guy that I follow a lot, says L&D is the R&D of all of this. It's the learning professionals, it's the educators. If we aren't the ones that are trying to guide people on how to upskill and reskill themselves through this change, then we're all lost. And so the only way to really do that is to start really figuring out what are the use cases, what can this technology do, because there's no way we can guide entire workforces through this transition if we don't. So and follow some people, but also you've got to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty would be my advice.
Excellent point. And Jeff, you mentioned here that you do have a talent marketplace, but it's underutilized. Yeah, you do need to do, if you've got it, that's excellent. See if you can breathe some life force into it to get that to come up, because it really should be part of the learning, that learning experience, because it's there. It's there. And as Graham pointed out, we'll send, you will have the recommendations and the people to follow, and the websites will be sent to you. We have 2 minutes, a little bit of time. If anyone has any questions or comments, anything they wanted to add to the conversation. Reshare the screen, absolutely, I can do that. 1 second.
Will, it looks like you have your hand up. Take the floor.
Thanks, Amanda. In a previous incarnation of my career, I was an enterprise solutions architect with IBM, and we did a lot of advanced machine learning and modeling and that type of thing. But one of the reasons I'm mentioning in this is we focused on something called microservices architecture, which is very real still today in terms of system design, and I'm drawing an analogy between that and the move towards skills. Right? An individual has many skills, a component offers many services. Right? One of the complications in a services architecture like that is the management and orchestration overhead. Where do we see that analogy or metaphor playing in this world as a risk?
Amanda?
Organizationally, the overhead to manage a skill-based environment could potentially be quite significant, rather than, it's much more granular than a role-based environment, in a team-based environment or profession-based environment. So where's the risk of significant management overhead and organizations becoming potentially even more bloated rather than less so, as that slide potentially indicated?
Yeah, I think one of the big things I would say on that is, you know, companies are trying to measure everything, and that's where the bloat comes in. They have to be specific. What are the skills particularly relevant to theirs and theirs only? You don't want to be measuring from aviation to zoology if you are a bank. But we see that happening. And so it's being very prescriptive. But yes, and also too, there's a whole bunch of issues around data privacy. What are we tracking, and do employees know what's being tracked, and are they aware of the purpose for what that's being tracked? You're technically supposed to follow GDPR, but you know, how many companies do? For example, the right to be forgotten, a company can't do that for an employee. So there's a lot of ethical and pragmatic things to consider that.
I just put my 2 cents in the chat. I think that's a great point, a bit of a big question to end a session when we don't have much more time to talk. But really, it's about, and like a lot of other things, don't boil the ocean. You know, it's easy to get overwhelmed by this and say we're going to over-architecture this and solve for every skills, you know, gap in the organization. That's probably just not feasible. And so start with the critical ones. Technology can be our friend here as well, and it's a work in progress. So start small, iterate, and expand. But it really will help people understand the why they're investing their time in this. And then again, let's please not just dump content against that because, oh, we need to, you know, give some people some modules about resilience, because clearly that's not going to get us where we need to go. And I think companies like ProfitAbility and others have much more interesting and impactful ways to close those gaps. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I think we're sort of top of the hour. Graham, do you want to wrap up as our gracious host?
Hostess, yeah.
Host, I almost called you a hostess. You're so pretty.
But Laurie and Amanda, thank you so much. Laurie, if you could just skip forward a couple of slides to just a couple of things from us. That was the last event of this year. If you do want to go and look back through other events of this nature, which I hope you found useful, then they are available on the website, and we'll send the links out in a follow-up mailer. And if you could just go to the final slide. As Amanda says, if you do want to try out this whole approach and find out how we make this sort of stuff really applicable and actually fun and impactful, then we've got a number of demos coming up focused on Making Waves is focused on sustainable transformation, Mosaic Games focused on leadership, culture, collaboration, pricing profits, commercial acumen. So do register or encourage your teams to register for those, and we'd love to see you there. And we'll be launching our new series of Human and Digital in the new year. I sound like a sort of TV presenter. Anyway, thank you very much, Laurie and Amanda, in particular, for giving up your time and your insights. And hope to see everyone again very soon. Thank you.
Likewise, and thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
There.
Thanks all.
Very interesting. Thank you.